All right, everybody. Well, good morning. It's so wonderful to see all of your lovely faces. We have 33 people here today. That's excellent. Welcome to all of our partners and all of our TTCF staff. So dedicated to be here at 8 a.m. Like Sashay, our investment person. She's so amazing. Welcome to our second quarterly meeting, our April meeting. As you know, we don't typically do introductions at the quarterly. We're making one minor adjustment this time, just so we make sure we point out to all attendees that sometimes we do have media join us. We just want to make sure that everyone's on notice, just so that, they manage for any potential misunderstandings or miscommunications to the public. And also just note that the meeting is broadcast live by Tahoe Truckee Media. So because of this, even if we don't specifically have media present in the room, it could still be covered. So just want to make sure I note that for everyone today, just so that they're aware of that. But otherwise, welcome everyone. Good to have you. I usually try to announce some kind of theme for our quarterly meetings. I'm sure many of you usually feel like I probably repeat the same thing every time, even though I try not to. We're trying to do something a little different with this quarterly agenda today in terms of prioritizing some of our partner highlights. Specifically, the first half of today's meeting involves what I would call some of our superstar creative highlights from people who took the leap, so to speak, on a really important housing initiatives, changes, pilot programs that needed to be put out there. So that's kind of what I'm putting out there as our theme today. Boldly going, maybe not where no man has gone before, but where we very desperately need to go, as well as reflecting on how we got there with lessons learned and wisdom from the last few years. So we're going to have a few folks who have presented to our Employers Housing Network coming to speak about initiatives they've been working on both in and outside of our region. And this includes putting partner updates kind of in the spotlight this time around, just because so many of our partners have made such progress on really important programs. We felt it important for everyone to be made aware of them early on instead of waiting until the second half of the meeting. So we will, of course, still have our regular working group and in-house business updates with perhaps some positive surprises in terms of upcoming progress on them, regional housing implementation plan follow-up items. And then as we get closer to public comment and closing, break into two breakout groups that are focused on reflecting on lessons learned over the last 5 years and our greatest strengths as a collaborative. So my hope is that everyone will leave with an understanding that we are, as a group of partners, pursuing all of the many important brainstorming ideas that our collaborative has come up with over the last few years in one way or another as we evolve, kind of tackle our various housing challenges. And if we aren't, you will all have a chance to let us know what isn't being pursued and needs to be in an anonymous poll at the close of the meeting. I always really like those. We did that during the emergency meeting last year, and it really helped kind of focus some of the direction that we're going in. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and give you guys a quick glimpse of the mission of Tahoe Truckee Community Foundation. I know you're all very familiar with this slide, but just for any new folks, especially speakers we have, this is just a glimpse of our important mission as we serve the community, as well as an overview of our many, many programs. This is actually just some of them and not all of them. Our fantastic board of directors, our dedicated staff members. Our staff numbers are growing in a really wonderful way, as well as a list of our current partners. For anyone who doesn't know who we are, we're up to almost 30. And then finally, the Mountain Housing Council meeting agreements, which we do at the beginning of all of our meetings, just to remind folks to be respectful of each other's opinions. Feel free to chat, including sending me a direct chat if I don't see your hand raised. I apologize ahead of time. And finally, before we launch into stories from the community, here's a glimpse at the agenda for the morning. In particular, we've got some really exciting presentations for you this morning for our stories from the community section. Christine, I think you said, do we have Charles yet? Doesn't look like we have him yet. Okay. All right. So in our stories for community section, we are going to have a few main speakers that focus on one, co-housing, including some of the proposed projects in our own region. Jan Holland with the Truckee Co-Housing Group is going to discuss the purchase of an almost 8-acre industrial redevelopment property on West River Street and that future site of the co-housing neighborhood. And then Justin Ellerby, the co-founder and executive director of HomeShare American River, will be speaking on his organization's excellent work in nonprofit cooperative housing and home sharing specifically. So Jan, do we have you with us?
You do. I'm
great.
I have a little bit of advantage. It's 10 a.m. here in Bentonville, Arkansas, where I'm doing a little bit of research for community redevelopment.
Awesome. Great.
Good. Well, it sounds like Chuck was going to be on before me, but you're pushing me ahead.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That would be great if you could start us off.
Yeah. Good. Well, just give me a moment. And is it going to be possible for me to share a screen?
Yeah. Go ahead, Jan.
Okay. Perfect. That is if I can recover the. Just give me one moment here. Window. Perfect. Yeah, it's not, of course, working on my tiny laptop that I brought out here. But let's see. Okay. I think we're now in business. Well, thank you for having us. It's good to see a lot of familiar faces there. Steve is right there on my screen, and I appreciate that the help that the Sierra Business Council and the Mountain Housing Council has with this project. I was going to skip really any real talk about what co-housing is, but I think the one real distinction that I want to share is that the difference between co-housing and co-living. A lot of people think that with co-housing that you're going to be in a dorm room for adults and families. It's not really that way. Everyone has their own townhome complex their own townhome, typically attached homes, but and smaller homes, and you have some really excellent shared amenities, including a common house. And here's a sketch from one of our founding members on what the common house and what the idyllic utopian view of co-housing would be. Of course, development isn't utopia, and these are actually projects that Chuck and Katie, Chuck Durrett, have been involved in. These are somewhat local examples. Down in Nevada City on the right hand side, you've got Nevada City co-housing, and then on the left you've got co-housing in Grass Valley. And the Grass Valley co-housing is a higher density project. It's a seniors co-housing project. So our project, we envisioned it as a kind of a cross between the Nevada City project and the project in Grass Valley in Nevada City, basically, that it would be intergenerational. There would be some 3-story buildings that had flats, and then there would be some walk-up townhomes, 2-story townhomes. And, just to give that a little bit of a density, because we're going to be talking about that, we were roughly shooting for about 16 units per acre. So it's actually quite a bit denser than Nevada City co-housing. And, our group was founded a little over about 4.5 years ago, by Julia and Lorenzo Worster. They're local teachers in the district, and they had spent a couple of years living down in Nevada City co-housing, and that's how they met Chuck. Chuck also lives in Nevada City co-housing, and they were really keen to get a group together. So we were actually very effective at getting a group together. We got about 20 families together for a Getting It Built workshop. One of the first things you'll notice about some of these slides is that 4.5 years ago, some of the folks, including our former Mayor Morgan Goodwin no longer live here. So one of the challenges of maintaining a co-housing or building a co-housing project that takes years to develop is certainly, one of the issues is that you have group turnover, and we're certainly not professional developers. So, but one of the early successes we had is that we secured now, just about 4 years ago, we secured this 8-acre parcel. And so that's an amazing accomplishment for a group of non-professional developers. And we pulled together literally 20 families to purchase this property. One of the first things you'll notice is that it's actually kind of large and expensive. I mean, certainly we would have loved to develop the whole 8-acre parcel, but as it was, the co-housing group could not afford that. That it just didn't seem like it would work out. So the co-housing project is really slated to be on a relatively small part of it. Of course, there's plenty of green space along the river, and that's very that's going to be an asset to not only the co-housing community, but certainly the community at large. But that's really what we're looking at is roughly a 2-acre area where we were going to build, roughly 30 units. So that would be about 15 units per acre. One of the challenges, and I don't want to get into the weeds too much with this group, and I know that we have folks from the town on the call as well. But one of the challenges we ran into right off the bat is that the zoning, even though we thought it was really advantageous for us, is for relatively high density housing. I mean, probably similar to what you see at the artist lofts. Maybe not quite that dense, but the artist loft is 24 units to the acre. And the zoning does not align with the property lines. And we were hoping to go in and just get a quick, quick zoning change, and or not a zoning change, but a lot line adjustment. That wasn't possible. And we were really encouraged to create a development app for the whole site. And I think that if we were more experienced developers, we would have said, that's crazy. Why do we need to do that if we want to just build a 30-unit co-housing project? And I think that we probably could have been more creative on the front end to avoid really what ended up being a 2-year journey into creating, not only a master plan, but a really detailed development plan for this project. And, really it came down to, and before anybody gets freaked out about, we're not building any of this at this point. We went down a master planning process with a well-known local architect, JK Architecture, and they did a great job helping us with this monumental task of figuring out what to do on the site. And we spent $300,000 to $400,000 on a master plan, and realized that we had to spend at least another $500,000 more to get a development proposal in, and that's when we decided that we were going down a dead end, and that ultimately we really wanted to develop a co-housing project, which in itself was going to be quite expensive. It's likely to be a $30 to $40 million project to build 30 units, which is unbelievable, really, and it actually has been one of the bigger challenges, and certainly has there from the beginning. We had group members, all local members, end up leaving because the price tag, and certainly they had housing needs that were more acute, right? They couldn't wait 3 or 4 years. And we're actually going to downsize from this. This is what we settled on, but in the end, we had quite a challenge even getting a smaller project with an approved development path, because interestingly, we were going to build, in this particular iteration, we were going to build about 24 units, and the recent California state laws have created a situation where it's illegal to downzone a property if you don't build the number of units that it's zoned for, then you need to find a new place to put those. And certainly that's a possibility, but all that takes time, and time is money. And certainly with a group like this, it's been quite challenging to put it all together. I wanted to just throw in there that while this has all been going on, we've been doing quite a bit to the property, and we're really excited about. We started cleaning it up right away. We've been upgrading the buildings, and we were starting to get all that going. The project now is really focused on a project that has no short-term rentals, full-time residents, local owners and renters, 3-story flats, 2-story end units, about 18 to 20 units. And currently we have about 12 to 15 families. We recently had to go through a restructuring, and we're probably at like 8 committed families at the moment. But this may seem like bad news, but it's actually on some level a lot easier to deal with the twists and turns that come with redeveloping a project with a fewer number of families. And one of the areas that we're really focusing on right now is fixing up the existing buildings on the project so that we can make those a better asset, so that we can borrow against those properties. We are fortunate that we own a property where we do have some rental income, which is helping us. A lot of co-housing groups that run into the types of challenges that we have would end up folding, or even their investors lose all of their money because they don't have a way to generate revenue to cover ongoing costs like property taxes, like carrying costs of the land, development costs. So we're really in a good place. It's been, we're looking forward to getting to re-engaging with the town with this, especially as our property is likely to get rezoned in the new general plan, which is probably going to be more flexible and more favorable for our project. I know early on in the project, Jeff Lux and Danielle had mentioned, well, why don't you get involved? Why don't we just do this simultaneously with the general plan? And I said, are you crazy? That's general plan's probably going to be like 3 or 4 years away. Well, we're 3 or 4 years away, and we're probably still a year or two away from finishing it. So it is quite possible now that we're going to have an approved project that correlates or is in tune with the new general plan process. But I think that was enough of an update there. I think that it's probably a good time to just open it up to questions.
Great. Thanks so much, Sean. We're going to actually move right on to Justin, and then if we have time for questions at the end, then open it up, if that's all right. Justin, you want to tell us a little bit about HomeShare American River and how it works?
Sure thing. And actually, if it's all right, I'll just share my screen too.
Sure.
How tight should I keep this?
Just go ahead and do exactly what you were going to. It's not a problem. We're still well within our limits.
Okay, very good. So that was very great. Was very glad to hear that presentation, Jan. I'm a Grass Valley boy myself, with many years of experience in nonprofit cooperative housing and actually retrofit co-housing as well, which is an allied model like N Street retrofit co-housing in Davis. Is fascinating. But basically, in both the nonprofit co-op housing and also in retrofit co-housing, even the development takes a very, very long time, and that's why I was amazed and became quite obsessed with nonprofit-supported home sharing programs. And basically, just as a data point here, because we're all into housing policy here, I'm sure. This article came out from Michael Anderson back in 2019 at a point where there was the Moms for Housing tenant takeover of vacant homes in Oakland. And that was big in the news. And they pointed out, that is a big deal, and that's sort of indicated in that middle column there. And indeed, you see that's a number of vacant homes. It's many times the entire homeless population of the state. But there's a bigger discrepancy also involved here, which is the number of unoccupied bedrooms in just the owner-occupied homes, not even counting rentals, right? And that's 20 times the entire homeless population of California. Now, we can't just move all homeless folks into people's private spare bedrooms. That's not the point of this, but it's a reference statistic. Very helpfully, Michael also included his methodology, how he got those numbers. And I adapted that to estimate that Placer County has 74,000 such bedrooms as of 2019. The last year we had good census data. Nevada County, 19,000, and Sac County, 216,000. So this is a massive wealth of housing opportunity that is just hanging out all around us, like dark matter almost. So that's one of the many reasons that last May I quit my cushy job with the state and to start full-time working in operating HomeShare American River. So we are a free nonprofit housemate matching and support service. Sort of the three pillars of what we do are the screening and selection. Then the matchmaking, where we not only introduce housemates to each other, but we also get them literally on the same page about all their expectations, needs, abilities, and preferences in a housemate match. It's, of course, very intimate situation where you're sharing a kitchen with someone, and it doesn't look like other kinds of landlord-tenant sort of relationships. Even better yet, we are really proud to make matches where there is an exchange of household services that can actually lower the rent, make those already inherently affordable rooms even more affordable. At the same time, address the housing crisis by addressing our in-home care crisis that's facing our seniors and our folks with disabilities in particular. But all that said, we are not at all restricted to only working with seniors and older adults, or even with folks with disabilities. We are actually able to serve all kinds of folks, and indeed that is the point. That demographic diversity is really what makes good matches happen, because the right match for an older senior may well be not another senior of the same gender. It may be a younger person who has more time than they have money, and is very, very glad to qualify for housing without going through as strict of a income qualification, perhaps, or having to meet a really high credit history bar that they just are too young to have developed. That's just one example. So as you can see here, I just included just the northeast corner of our service map here. As you can see right now, we only go as far out as Nevada City and as far east as Placerville, just down at the bottom of the map there. But the only constraint really on how we've set up our system is not my time, but actually the time of our volunteer matchmakers that I work with very closely to train them up on our system and our commitments. And we started out already with Lynn Nelson, an incredible woman from Loomis, who's been working with us since Jump to help make matches. And also my wife, Marta, who lives with me, of course, here in Sacramento, has also been pitching in incredibly that way. I'll acknowledge we are entirely funded by the Area 4 Agency on Aging, and they do realize and subscribe to my strategy that we are going to be working again across all kinds of demographics. So a lot of outreach to students, to veterans groups, to faith-based associations, and workers and professionals. This is a program for everyone. We're also under the legal umbrella of the Placer People of Faith Together, an interfaith association. And we work in strong collaboration with our 47 other nonprofit supported home sharing programs across the US, which have been around for 40 years now. So you can feel pretty confident that I know a little bit about what I'm doing here as a former home share guest many times over, a current home share host in I and my wife's own home with 4 other housemate renters, and an aspiring senior. As I like to say. So contact info is right there. I'll also share that in the chat. Thank you so much, y'all. Very much looking forward to taking your questions and getting inquiries from you all, and especially into if you know of any great volunteer matchmakers or resources for that, then I would be very glad to expand our service area out east a little bit and try to be of service to you all. Thanks.
Great. Thanks so much, Justin. And thank you, Jan, as well. I've told everyone, just due to the time, that if they have questions, maybe we can gather those questions up and ask you all and circulate the answers afterward. But I think in general, folks, Justin, do have questions. I don't know, not to put you on the spot, about kind of overall numbers, just in terms of matching, in terms of like the number of matches and the outcomes. And if you have that, or if you want to give me that later, I don't know if you have an idea or an estimate of kind of the totals.
Yeah, it's pretty easy at this point, Tara. So we only started in May, like I said. Programs like this, which run entirely on trust and outreach, they take typically a year to start up before they make any matches at all. I'm proud to say that we made 3 matches back in December. As far as impacts that goes, a lot of it's very touchy-feely, but because we take risk and hassle out of the situation for the hosts that we work for, they charge much lower rents than they would if they were just trying to muddle through on their own. So the rents in those cases were $550, $600, and $700, respectively. So in those neighborhoods, those are very, very affordable. I would also say we just got an explosion of hosts this month, and I'm actually currently working for 7 hosts to find 9 guests by May 1. So it's a great problem to have, and I'll be jumping off this meeting relatively soon to get back to that. So. Yeah.
That's great, Justin. So wonderful. Even if it's 3 matches, though, that's 6 families. So that's pretty, a minimum. So that's pretty exciting.
Right. Individuals, actually, we're happy to work with families. It just typically happens that you don't have families, enough rooms and extra rooms in a given home to place families, but we're happy to do that. That's an option with one of the hosts that we're working with.
Well, great. That's fantastic. Thank you for all the good work that you're doing, Justin. I hope it keeps expanding.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thanks for the opportunity to talk this morning.
Great. Thank you to our storytellers again. And again, if folks have questions for them, just let us know, let Christina and I know, and we'll get those questions onto them. So as I mentioned, we're going to highlight some of our specific partner updates right away based on a few that we knew about. We wanted to make sure all of our partners who work in housing were aware of. We're going to start with updates on deed restriction programs and any changes and updates with those programs in both Truckee and Placer County. But I just kind of want to put a plug out there. Shauna Purvine from Placer County is also going to be speaking in more depth and detail at our upcoming Employer Housing Network meeting next Thursday at noon, specifically discussing how employers and private businesses can get more involved in deed restricted housing if folks want to join us then. So Shauna, do you want to go ahead and provide us with an update on the program in Placer?
Tara, good morning. This is Stephanie Holloway. Shauna actually wasn't able to make it for the first part of this meeting, so happy to give that update, or if you want to delay or change schedule, however you want to do it.
Oh, Stephanie, that would be great. Please do go ahead. That's great.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, let me give you some updates from Placer's housing team. Shauna and Emily were sort of pulled away for something else, so I'm here from the CEO's office to give you these updates this morning. So just to talk a little bit about some initiatives we have on countywide housing code amendments. We have some amendments that are going to our board in May. These include some, I think, initiatives and strategies around housing that you all have been talking about, and kind of some regional issues that we hear about around housing. So these are things like tiny homes, some small cluster developments, and housing kind of in some mixed use areas. So those housing code amendments, if you're plugged into our board, you'll see those come forward in the next month or so. As far as our workforce housing preservation, I'm not sure how familiar all of you are with that. Obviously, that's something that we launched a while ago, but we are looking to do some revisions to that coming up in the next couple of months. A number of things that we're sort of vetting with the community and hearing. We would like to talk to our board, really seek some feedback on how we might make some adjustments to make that program more effective. So I'll just mention a few here. Sean and Emily could probably do a little more service to this, but I'll just mention that, we're looking at removing some of the income limit that we have on this program. We're looking to remove some previous homeownership exclusions. I think there's a piece of our current program that requires that you haven't been a homeowner within 12 months or so. So we're looking to potentially remove that from the restriction. What else? So another piece of it, we are looking and wanting to talk to our board about allowing employer contributions into the workforce housing preservation program to sort of come alongside what the county is looking to provide for the program. So, looking for that public-private partnership to really advance some of the resources for homeowners.
Hey, this is Charles. Half an hour late. I apologize.
Oh, that's okay, Charles. Go ahead and stand by, and we'll get around to you. Thank you, though.
Great, and then I'll just highlight maybe one last thing here of again, sort of a conversation that we will have with our board. We are looking at options to potentially, come in behind homeowners to provide sort of a backing, that would allow them to potentially have a cash offer. We hear that a lot of, even though our program competes with other buyers in the market, that there's a lot of cash offers that are getting sort of elevated right now. So, looking at other areas to just really be more competitive, I think, in the market. So that's the workforce housing preservation program. Like I said, it is new, so we're continuing to monitor and try to make adjustments to make that program, more effective. I'll mention another program that we're looking at taking to our board is a lease to locals program, similar to what the town of Truckee is already doing. So, again, just looking at that option as another potential resource.
Excellent.
From the constructability point, I'll just mention our Dollar Creek Crossing project is still moving forward. That's a housing project that we've been working on in the basin in the Dollar Hill area. So that one's moving forward through environmental review. We're looking to use some environmental streamlining on that project and hopefully allow it to move forward more quickly. And then lastly, let me just mention our STR ordinance. It has sort of a housing implication. And so I just wanted to mention that program went into effect March 11th. We are currently accepting new and renewal applications for the STR program and processing those. Our board did adopt a cap on the number of STRs. So there is a limit on the total number of STR permits that we will issue in a given year. And that number is just short of 3,900 will be our total cap. So a lot of progress being made on that. It went live April 1st. And so we're working diligently to process permits as they come in. So I have lots more detail to give you, but I'll stop there, Tara, and just, happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Stephanie. You guys are doing such great work and constantly working to help with the housing crisis. Just to confirm, with the deed restricted program, it is still limited to annual income of 245% of the area median income for single family and then 220% for multifamily, right?
Correct. That's something that's currently that's an area that we're looking to potentially have that discussion of with our board to remove those limits.
Okay. And you do have to have at least one household member who's currently employed at least 30 or more hours per week within the boundaries, correct?
Absolutely, correct.
Okay, great. Awesome. Thank you so much, Stephanie. I'm going to go ahead and go right on to Hillary, if that's okay, to provide an update on the below market rate guidelines that were just passed, which is Truckee's deed restricted program. Hillary, do you want to go ahead and describe some of those for us?
I will happily describe our new program. So Town Council adopted the program guidelines for our new deed restriction program, which is similar to Placer's.
Hillary, I don't know if it's a little bit hard to hear you. If you're able to talk a little bit closer to your mic.
Is that better? No?
A little bit.
It's a little bit better. Yeah.
Let me log back on I have a different computer here. Let me log back on and see if that helps.
Thank you.
And it's Lindsay Romack from Town Council. While Hillary's logging back on, I'll just jump in and add, on Monday, the Truckee Town Council, we had our budget workshop. And we again are committed to housing. As I think most of you know, in 2020, voters passed Measure K, which added additional transient occupancy tax to short-term rentals and hotels. And we just reaffirmed that we'd like to continue to see investment from Measure K go towards housing. And then again, at our council workshop in February, we reaffirmed our council commitments that we had established last year, which one of them is to actively support the development of workforce housing. So just wanted to toss that in, but Hillary and Jen and the rest of the staff at Truckee are doing all the hard work. So I'll send it back to Hillary.
Great. Thanks, Lindsay. Scott, did you have a question?
Yeah, I had a question for Stephanie of the follow-up. If we have a quick second. The leasing to locals, is that the program that Truckee does where there's a monetary incentive for long-term rentals? Is that how that works? And then number two, as she had mentioned, like the private public partnerships with either business with the county or if there's private money that wants to come in and partner up, have details been talked about that as far as how that might pencil out for projects or, are there certain tax breaks like that for someone that wants to jump on board with the county if they wanted to kind of help the cause and put their money somewhere?
I think that's actually what's going to be discussed at our next Thursday employer meeting. Go ahead, Stephanie.
Yeah, I was just gonna kind of mention, the lease to locals program. Again, that's something that we're teeing up for our board. It's just really sort of us kind of coming alongside what Truckee is doing and providing that connection service for. I don't know if there will be actually an incentive just to. Really, I think the board's commitment to continue to provide resources. So that's the lease to locals piece. The second part of your question, sorry, I don't know if I caught that.
It's all right. It was just basically, you had mentioned about businesses wanting to invest or partner up with the county to kind of have that public-private partnership going on. Is that open to just any private money where someone wants to kind of just help out the cause, or is it just businesses they're looking at? Or I guess
sure. Yeah. Well, I think it was just sort of a recognition that, the county provides, incentives up to 16%. We have some limited resources there, but that doesn't mean that, we aren't hearing from and partnering potentially with private businesses that are also looking to sort of incentivize and place employees in the region. So I think it's more of a, just a willingness to partner and potentially even, again, with us being government, we have to be really careful of, the mixing of money a bit. So I think, we're just really trying to figure out how do we work together potentially with the private businesses that want to come in and provide some additional resources even beyond what the county is able to provide.
Okay, thanks.
Hillary, do we have you back?
Yes, can you hear me better now?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, great. So excited to provide an update on our recently adopted below market rate program guidelines. That's what we're calling our new deed restriction program. The program has not launched yet, but we adopted guidelines in March at our first council meeting. Right now, we're working on hiring a third-party administrator for the program with an aim to launch the program this summer. So fairly similar to Placer's program, but has some differences. The program that we've adopted will provide 4 different frameworks for deed restriction purchase. The first is similar to Placer's, and that's a home buyer program. So a home buyer may pre-qualify for the program and then use the funding that the town provides to purchase a deed restriction at the time of purchase, which they can use to contribute toward their down payment or for any other use at that time. We also offer the program for a home seller. So somebody who is looking to sell their home may deed restrict the home before selling it. The third use is for truckee businesses may deed restrict housing as workforce housing to then rent to eligible regional employees. And then a fourth use is deed restriction for new development. So if a developer is going above and beyond the requirements for inclusionary housing, they can work with the town to offer additional units as deed restricted units for a payment from the town. Of those uses, the qualification or the income qualification is 245% AMI, which is similar to Placer. However, the new development use has an income cap of 180% AMI. And at least one member of the household must work regionally, or to qualify for the program, you must have at least one member of the household who currently works within the school district boundaries or has a job offer within the school district boundaries. So it could be eligible to, for example, a new employee who is recruited by a regional employer and is trying to move here for that employment. So we wanted to fill that gap as well. We do allow for current home ownership, which is one of the changes that Stephanie was mentioning, Placer's considering. But the participant cannot have assets that exceed 30% of the home purchase price, and that does include any equity they have in a current home. So if they have significant home equity, they may not qualify. So those are sort of the bones of the program we're putting together. And again, we're looking to have that launched this summer. A couple other town housing updates. Tara, do you want those now, or would you like those later in the agenda?
Oh, now would be great. Thanks, Lori.
Yeah. So the town also just adopts, I feel like I'm repeating many of the things that Placer is working on, but also just adopted our updated short-term rental ordinance. We adopted that at our April 12th council meeting and looking to roll that out this spring. So that updated ordinance caps the number of short-term rental registration certificates at 1,255, which is the number that we had as of December 31st, 2021. So essentially capping it at the current number. It's also looking to phase out short-term rentals in multifamily units and accessory dwelling units, which tend to be the units that are most affordable and accessible as long-term workforce housing. So really, I guess I should start with the driver behind these updates was really to help use regulations on short-term rentals to see if we can use that as a lever to help address our housing needs, our housing crisis here. So the phase out of multifamily and ADU is really intended to target those specific units that tend to be most affordable. With that phase out, any currently registered property owner will be able to continue to renew their registration certificate, but we will not be issuing new certificates for either multifamily or accessory dwelling units. And then we also adopted a 1-year waiting period after a home sells before it will be eligible to register or begin the registration process for a short-term rental. And that is really intended to disincentivize investment in properties for the primary purpose of short-term renting. With that, we also increased the penalties for violations of the short-term rental registration program. And part of the impetus behind that is we anticipate that with a cap on short-term rentals, we will have a wait list to get a registration permit, and wanted to ensure that we had a significant penalty if you are advertising or renting without being registered. As far as next steps, the deadline for renewal for those who are registered in 2021 is May 15th. After that point, we'll know exactly how many registration certificates we have available. We anticipate we'll have a small number, somewhere in the sort of 50 to 100 range, that may be available after that renewal deadline. And then we'll open up registration for those not currently registered on June 13th. We anticipate we'll have a limited number to release at that point, and then we will be starting a wait list with additional interested properties. So that's it on short-term rentals. And then the third topic I wanted to touch on is our Lease to Locals program, which is currently called our Workforce Housing Grant Program, which is operated by Landing Locals, our third-party partner in that program. We launched that program in October of 2020. It's been very successful. We brought some program updates to council and adopted those last August, which increased the grant amount that we offer to homeowners to lease a property to long-term tenants who work regionally. We'll be bringing that back to council next Tuesday for an update on the program outcomes, as well as some proposed changes for next fiscal year. Those include updating or making some slight adjustments and increases to the grant amount that we offer to rent to local workforce members. Right now, our grant amount depends on the length of the lease. So we offer leases from as short as 3 months up to 12 months with an incentive, and then also depends on the number of people housed or eligible local workforce members and children housed. We found that our 3 to 6 month grant amount that we were offering has not had any takers. So the shortest leases that have been offered by local property owners is 6 months. So we'll be eliminating that shortest lease, or proposing to eliminate that shortest lease term amount, and just going with 2 different tiers. One is seasonal, which is 5 months or greater, and then the other would be an annual lease term. And then we also found that in the grant amounts that we were offering, we had sort of a complicated tier system, which was a little bit confusing for people to understand. And it also decreased the grant amount a little bit per person as you added additional members to the household. So we're looking to simplify that a little bit and offering a flat amount per eligible workforce member or child housed in the updated program. So we're excited about that. And then the final change to mention with that one is Landing Locals has been expanding to other communities, including Placer County, where they've proposed a program. So they're updating the name of their program. So we'll be looking to change our program name to Lease to Locals to match the name that they're using in other markets. And Lindsay or Jen, if I missed anything on any of those topics, feel free to jump in as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Hillary. Thanks for always filling in on the housing stuff in addition to all of the other work that you're also doing. We really appreciate having your representation on all of our Tiger teams and all of our meetings and everything. It's very, very helpful. So really exciting work that you and Placer are doing. I agree with what Sue Daniels posted. I think it's going to really help the market. So thanks so much for those awesome updates. So along those same lines, I wanted to have we wanted to have Palisades Tahoe present on their pilot winter employee housing program that they just moved people into in February. Their Human Resources Director, Jennifer Sharp, actually came to speak with our employer housing network in March, but she couldn't make it today. So I'm just going to let people know a few details about the program. It is an RV-based program. I think it has about 30 spots, if I remember correctly, which is exciting because similar programs typically have around 9 or 10 spots based on the research we've done. It is along Highway 89, and it is based on a partnership with the U.S. Forest Service. Palisades Tahoe applied for a special use permit to get the program going. And for now, it is for winter only, although I do think that they will seek to expand the program. So just a little update on that as well. And then the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency has also been making a lot of progress in moving forward and introducing some very exciting proposals for workforce housing development standards at its March 30th Tahoe Living Working Group meeting. Including those related to density, height, and pilot programs. So with us to discuss this is TRPA's Senior Long Range Planner, Alyssa Bettinger. Alyssa, do you want to go ahead and talk about some of those?
Yeah, thanks, Tara. And I might share my screen too. I have a few slides.
Sure.
Okay. Can you guys see that?
Yes.
Great. Well, thanks for having me this morning. Again, Alyssa Bettinger with the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency. Wanted to give you an update on the work that we've been doing around development standards with our Tahoe Living Working Group. And I'm going to just give a very condensed version of the presentation that we gave to our working group about 3 weeks ago. And I'll try to keep it as short as I can, Tara.
No, don't worry about that. Please go into as much detail as you want.
Okay. So a few months back, we hired a Cascadia Partners, their consulting firm out of Oregon, to do a pro forma analysis for us, and specifically looking at how our development standards, both TRPAs and the local jurisdictions, impact the overall feasibility of building housing in the basin. And specifically for TRPA, the development standards that we typically look at and here are a challenge, are density, coverage, and height allowances. So that was kind of the focus of this analysis by Cascadia. And we looked at 3 different scenarios in 3 different locations around the basin, just to sort of get a well-rounded view of what was going on. So the first was a duplex scenario in the Kings Beach residential subdistrict up in Placer. The second scenario was what would it take to build a 4-plex in the Incline Village residential area. And then last, we looked at building a larger, fully deed-restricted multi-unit development within the town center off of Ski Run Boulevard in the city of South Lake Tahoe. For today, I'm just going to talk about the first scenario, the Kings Beach scenario, just because I could probably spend an hour talking about this. But we do have our full presentation, or this full presentation, on our website, and I'm happy to share that in the chat after this. So first, just a quick look at the Kings Beach residential subdistrict. The allowed uses in the area plan include a variety of multifamily types. So you can see on the bottom, technically those are all allowed, but we wanted to see if looking at kind of overlaying our development standards on top of a parcel, like how would that actually play out, and are they actually feasible to build, whether or not they're allowed. And so again, we looked at building, what would it take to build a duplex on a 5,000 square foot lot? We chose a 5,000 square foot lot primarily because a lot of the lots in the Kings Beach residential subdistrict are about a little over 5,000 square feet. And then additionally, we found that just over 5,000 square feet is the median size of a parcel that is already zoned for multifamily in the basin. And so by using this parcel size, it's very representative of kind of not just Kings Beach, but other areas that are, or I guess are other multifamily areas in the basin. And so our consultants put together kind of an existing and an alternative scenario, using the existing and I guess test development standards that we asked them to look at. And so under the existing, you'll see that typically it's about 15 units per acre, density, 3 stories height. We're assuming that this is a flat, high capability land. So you can build up to 30%. And then for the alternative test scenario, we looked at increasing maximum density to up to 20 units per acre, increasing height just a little bit up to 3.5 stories, and then allowing additional coverage up to 70%, to see kind of how that played out and impacted the feasibility of building a duplex. And so the first thing that our consultants ran into was density. They found that building a duplex on that size of a lot isn't actually feasible at 15 units per acre, and that they would need at least 17.5 units per acre. Additionally, they found, if we were to increase densities, they found that 30% allowable coverage right now creates a bit of an awkward living space. And so because of the parking requirements, the garage and the parking area would take up pretty much the entire ground floor, which would leave around 900 square feet for the remaining unit. And for new construction, this typically isn't, this is 900 square feet is generally smaller than most developers want to go. And so they found that in this scenario, using existing standards, it would be a negative rate of return for the developer, and that the resale value would actually be quite a bit higher than quite a bit higher than market value. And again, you can see the financials here. And you can also see that under the alternative, the test scenario, by just increasing coverage allowances to 34%, you can get to quite a bit bigger unit at 1,250 square feet. And that increases the rate of return quite a bit, and also reduces the resale value to a little bit closer to market. And again, this is sort of visuals. I'm a very visual thinker, and so this always helps me kind of understand what we're talking about. So you can see this is the existing and this is the test. So the units just got a little bit bigger. The parking stayed the same because the local jurisdictions typically dictate how many parking spots are required for development. And then the amount of landscaping just went down a little bit because that coverage allowance went up just slightly. So again, this is kind of the order of challenges that our consultant found. So if you increase maximum density, the next thing you run into is coverage. And then we actually found that setbacks and parking are kind of the next challenges that you have. And then they found that height, the 36-foot height maximum really starts to become more of a barrier when you're looking at larger multifamily development. So in this case, up to 6 units or more. So height didn't really come into play very much in this specific scenario. So again, we have the full 3 scenarios on our website. I'll put that in the chat after this if you are interested in taking a look. So moving into TRPA's proposal on how to kind of build in some flexibility with height, coverage, and density to alleviate some of these challenges that developers face in the basin. So again, the reason that we're looking at this is because development standards impact the overall building envelope. And when there's not enough flexibility, just developers don't want to come in and build the type of housing that we want to see for our workforce. And I think it's important to note that while the focus of our Tahoe Living working group is housing, TRPA obviously has many other goals. There are regional plan goals that we have to make sure that we're taking into consideration whenever we're making policy changes. And so development standards we see are kind of at the core of housing, community design, land use, and environmental protection goals. And so just moving into kind of the basic proposal of what we brought to the working group on March 30th. Density, what we've heard, again, going back to that scenario that I just presented, you can see that in a lot of places, depending on the size of the parcel, oftentimes our existing density allowances don't even allow multifamily or workforce housing to be built. And so to address this, we are proposing to allow a minimum of 3 multifamily units or a triplex on all parcels that are currently zoned for multifamily in the basin. This would, at this point, would only apply to deed restricted units, but we're looking at whether or not we could expand that to non-deed restricted, kind of getting that affordable by design component. And this would be regardless of the units per acre requirement right now. So even if it was 15 units per acre, we wouldn't necessarily be changing that. We would just allow for up to 3 units on a parcel if you couldn't get that with existing density standards. The next development standard that Cascadia identified was coverage, and limiting the amount of coverage has a variety of environmental benefits, specifically preventing impacts to water quality, promoting soil health and nutrient cycling, allowing vegetation to grow on properties, preventing erosion. There's quite a long list. But we also recognize that limiting the amount of coverage, especially for allowing the same amount of coverage for multifamily and single family housing, limits what gets built and limits the amount of workforce housing that we have in the basin. And so to help address this, our proposal is to allow property owners or developers to build above base allowable, so above that 30% on high capability lands for multifamily or ADUs. And again, this would be limited to deed restricted units, so affordable, moderate, or achievable. It would also be limited to high capability lands, so land capability 4 through 7. And then they would still need to meet our existing mitigation requirements, but we're also looking at how we can potentially build in some flexibility or further incentives for people who are building deed restricted units. And then lastly, I wanted to talk about height. I mentioned that height, we typically don't see a whole lot of challenges unless you're building those larger multifamily developments like Sugar Pine in the South Shore, Delmas in the North Shore. And so our height proposals are really intended at kind of building in a little bit more flexibility with height. So developers can get a couple more feet, just the amount that they would need to make it pencil. So the first height proposal is allowing height to be measured from the average point of natural grade instead of where we currently measure it from the lowest point of natural grade. We also heard some feedback that measuring height from the finished floor could be an option. And then the second height proposal would be to reevaluate roof pitch allowances for deed restricted multifamily. One, to better accommodate more energy efficient building styles. When you have a very steep roof pitch, you have to heat your whole attic, which is not necessarily getting at our sustainability goals. And also we're just seeing that design trends are changing, and we should be able to allow a little bit more flexibility with that. So that is kind of a quick summary of what we've proposed. We're still very much in the input process right now. So we'll be going to our local government housing committee at the end of May as and then our regional plan implementation committee in June, just to kind of further refine this proposal, hear any concerns. And then at that point, we would begin the environmental analysis and code amendments, and happy to come back to this group at the next quarterly meeting with another update. That's it.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Alyssa. And thanks so much for mentioning the next steps. I was going to ask of what the stage was in terms of the environmental analysis or committees or code amendments. So I really appreciate you letting us know where we are in those stages. That's really helpful and really exciting. I know a lot of people are looking forward to some potential changes with density issues in the basin. So that's excellent. Really exciting news. All right. So I think that we are going to go ahead and move on to Chase. Chase, do you want to go ahead and give us an update on new workforce housing projects and grants in South Lake and more on behalf of Tahoe Prosperity Center?
Yeah, thanks, Dora. So, hi, everybody. I'm Chase Janbrin, Program Manager for the Tahoe Prosperity Center. If you're not familiar with us, we are the regional basin-wide economic and community development agency. And we work on a host of programs, one of which, of course, is housing. And our first housing-specific program began in 2018 on the South Shore, and it culminated with the South Shore needs assessment and action plan, literally in March of 2020, right before the lockdowns began. And funding was understandably diverted to emergency services, but my point, and I think the cool thing here, is that even when we felt that things had stalled, the action plan kept moving forward. And when we did finally reconvene, we were all pleasantly surprised to see that every single partner across the board had made substantial progress to the strategic initiatives that they had volunteered to take on, even despite the COVID challenges. Some of those things, one of them I want to give big kudos to the TRPA. I think that's a key point of progress. I was really impressed with that study, and I'm really looking forward to significant development changes that I think should really make meaningful change to allow for the types of homes that our local workforce will live in. The city has got 14 separate housing programs now, including one earlier was mentioned, Tiny Homes on Wheels, and that's one that has got new standards for the city. Sugar Pine Village was mentioned, which is a 248-unit deed-restricted rental development. It's a partnership between the developer Related California, the City of South Lake, the Conservancy, St. Joseph Community Land Trust. St. Joseph Community Land Trust is also on track with a very unique program, if you're not familiar with that model. And it's the only program that I'm familiar with that allows for permanently affordable ownership. We frequently think of, when we think about deed restricting housing, we think about the rental model, right? And this is an opportunity for folks to come in and actually own a home at a deed restricted level that gets them on that housing ownership ladder. And then following up on, after the success that we showed on the South Shore, we were contacted by a couple of groups in the Incline Village, Crystal Bay area that we ended up, becoming known as the Washoe Tahoe. So that Washoe Tahoe housing partnership, we did the study in the needs assessment in 2021. And part of that was identifying the opportunities in the area of what could be moved forward with. So thanks to funding from Washoe County, the Parasol Foundation, and the Incline Village Crystal Bay Business Association, we published this report. We have now received additional funding to reconvene. So at the moment, we're in this interim phase in preparation for additional funds from the county. So right now, we're really focused on reconvening this group, solidifying the message, so that we can, I'm sure everyone on this call recognizes the importance of education and messaging within the community. So that's the stage we're at now. So in the next couple of months, we can solidify and go to market with our brand and our message and hit the ground running when the additional county funding comes in, and we can re-engage consultants as needed. And one last thing I want to touch on is our Envision report. I mentioned Tahoe Prosperity Center, really at our core is economic development and community development. And Thanks to some federal funding received from the Economic Development Agency, we began this Envision Tahoe project, which is really a basin-wide economic vitality project. And part of the project was the biggest community input poll that's ever been done in the basin. We had 1,799 responses, which was above what we were shooting for with 1,500. And unsurprisingly, housing was the number one concern of residents. It falls right in line with every economic development conversation we have with employers and agencies. I mean, at this point, you can't even talk about economic health and vitality without talking about housing. I mean, it's really economic development 101 at this point. And one particularly interesting data point is when the consultants looked at the basin-wide housing inventory, there's only been a 1% increase in housing inventory over the last decade. In 10 years, there's been a 1% increase to our housing stock. And of those, the majority have been some of these really large single-family homes that really cater towards second homeowners as opposed to our local workforce. And meanwhile, in the first year of COVID, in 2020, the basin saw a population increase of about 5%. So in 1 year, we had 3,000 new residents enter the basin, but over the last 10 years, there's only been an increase of 1% of the housing stock, which was just a few hundred. And we expect that the 2021 numbers are even bigger. So, anecdotally, we've been, I think, feeling this disconnect between supply and demand. And now we've got some data behind it showing, just how real those numbers are. Incidentally, I want to point out that transportation in the survey, transportation was number 2. The third concern was a distant 3. So housing and transportation are, I think, neck and neck. And, transportation and transit is such a key component of housing when we look at it at a regional level. So, I think all of this between the South Shore work, the Washoe Tahoe work, and the work on the North Truckee, North Tahoe area, the Mountain Housing Council, it really speaks to the critical importance of what we're all working on and, the impressive progress that everybody is making in their respective communities. And, I have to say that at this point, I've got a dream that at some point all of our work melds and we find a way to work together to really have a regional view of housing. Everyone knows the Keep Tahoe Blue. Maybe at some point we have Keep Tahoe Housed, something like that, to really bring awareness to the regional look and feel for what we need housing for our community and our workforce. So all in there, that's all I've got, Tara, for now. So I'll hand it back to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Chase. A lot of really positive updates from everyone, all of our partners, and all the important work that they're doing that I know is going to be an investment overall to our solving our housing challenges. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and open it up to other partner updates before we take a break. And that can include asking questions of any of the speakers who have already spoken. I know folks have been asking them questions in the chat, which is great. But if anyone else has partner updates that we haven't already touched on, or if you want to ask any follow-up questions of Chase or Alyssa or Hillary or Stephanie that you weren't able to ask, please do go ahead. All right, and just a reminder that we also do bring a lot of these folks to our Employer Housing Network meetings on the 4th Thursday of every month. So if you ever want to join us for those, they're at noon. And you can talk to these folks in greater detail and ask questions and make proposals as well. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and I guess have us take a break if we don't have any. Oh, Tony, you had a question. Go ahead.
Good morning. How are you?
Good. How are you doing, Tony?
I'm doing great. I'm trying to get my camera to work and figuring out so I can share my face with everyone, but it's not going to let me do that at the moment. I just wanted to introduce myself real quick. My name is Tony Kurwowski. I'm the new CEO of the North Lake Tahoe Resort Association. And if I could, Tara, I've got about 10 slides I'd love to run through for like maybe 5 to 7 minutes with the team here. If I can share a screen and see if this will work.
Sure. Go ahead. Please do give it a try. Yep,
okay.
We see it.
Can you see my screen right now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, sorry I couldn't see my face, but hey, at least you got the screen and the slideshow here. I just wanted to take a minute and let everyone know that the North Lake Tahoe Resort Association, as you may or may not know, has been in a transition now for the better part of a year, moving from an organization that's funded by transient occupancy tax or TOT funds, which primarily come out of overnight stays in our regional lodging facilities, to what's called a Tourism Business Improvement District, which is a self-assessed business assessment to all of our assessed businesses in the North Lake Tahoe region. And this is a significant move for us in terms of funding, because what that's ultimately going to do is free up some existing funds that are TOT funds that currently support the North Lake Tahoe Resort Association to go back to transportation and housing projects in our community. And seeing as how this is the Mountain Housing Council, I thought it would be really fitting for this group to at least understand that transition and where we're going with those freed up funds and how they're going to be distributed to projects in the community in the future. So real quickly, to understand the North Lake Tahoe Tourism Business Improvement District services that we will offer in the new TBID. And I'll start off by saying we actually made the transition to TBID funding April 1st, which is really exciting for us to make that move, because this is going to initiate all of these things we're going to talk about here. So the North Lake Tahoe Tourism Business Improvement District is an assessment district providing service benefits to payers by funding things that we've already done as the North Lake Tahoe Resort Association. So things like marketing, promotions, special events, all those things are going to be encapsulated in the TBID, things we've already done. Things like our visitor services, visitor centers, the one right here in Tahoe City that's year round, and then also the seasonal one in Kings Beach are still going to be serviced through us. Now we will, as part of the TBID, have funding to operate sustainability and mitigation of tourism impact projects, which is really exciting for us. This will allow us to address things in real time, like if we see waste stream issues from enhanced visitorship during key peak periods in the region. It will allow us to reach out for business support and advocacy, something we've always done, but this will allow us to do it a little bit more in a few different ways, as well as economic development, transportation, and other opportunities. So the other opportunities section here is where like some housing, workforce housing would fall into. The North Lake Tahoe Tourism Business Improvement District Management District Plan is the managing kind of Bible that we live by in the TBID. It specifies the use of the TBID funds and outlines the budget by category. So I'm going to jump to that real quick and just show you a real, did that slide change for you guys? Just making sure you're seeing what I'm seeing. Great, thank you. I see some heads nodding yes. This is the Tourism Business Improvement District Management District Plan budget split out. We figure our rough initial budget's about $6 million. So our budget is set up percentage-wise. So no matter what our revenue stream is from the assessments, it'll be split up in these percentages. So 52% going to marketing, promotions, and sales, which is roughly what we've historically spent, inviting visitors to the region. Visitor service and visitor centers is 7.3%. Business advocacy and support is 5.5%. Zone 1 specific services. So you could think of Zone 1 as the lakeside communities from Homewood all the way over to and through Kings Beach. Zone 2 specific area is everything outside of that, which is mostly outside of the basin in our district, which is roughly, you could think about being Olympic Valley, Alpine Meadows, and North Star regions. Sustainability and mitigation of tourism impacts is 3.3% of the budget. And then we have some admin, some contingency, and some admin fees on top of that. Another thing that's really great with us as we move from funding sources from TOT to TBID is the fact that we're actually also doing more than just marketing traditionally how we have been to our community to visitation. So traditionally, we've been what's called a destination marketing organization, and now we're adding to that as well and focusing more so on becoming a destination stewardship organization. So that's also managing our visitation and the impacts our visitation has on our community. Some of our stewardship strategies include elevating the experience for all of Lake Tahoe, for all, honor our region's history and culture and local culture, ensure that our natural resources are cared for by visitors and residents, creating opportunities that support a balance for business owners, workers, and residents, and engaging our partners in collaborations toward common outcomes. We have some new committees that will help us govern our new Tourism Business Improvement District. Ultimately, our Tourism Business Improvement District funds are approved by the existing North Lake Tahoe Resort Association Board of Directors. There are two committees that will roll up and make advisory recommendations of budgets and projects to the North Lake Tahoe Resort Association Board of Directors for final approval of expenditure. One of those committees is the North Lake Tahoe Resort Association North Lake Tahoe TBID Advisory Committee. The second one is the North Lake Tahoe TBID Zone 1 Advisory Committee. The TBID Advisory Committee will advise on that whole pie that we looked at earlier, the whole budget pie itself. So if we have a large scale project or we're doing annual budgeting, it'll be recommended finally by the TBID Advisory Committee. And we also have a Zone 1 specific advisory committee. And I'm going to jump back to the pie again and show you this Zone 1 specific service area. This is the slice of the pie that the TBID Zone 1 committee will own. The reason why we have a specific Zone 1 services budget that's governed by a Zone 1 committee is that we have an extra 1% assessment for all lodging facilities in the Zone 1 area. So that again is that area from Homewood on the lakeside all the way up to Kings Beach. So those folks will be empowered to manage their own extra 1% assessment as they see fit in accordance with the Tourism Business Improvement District Management District Plan. Kind of already touched on the governance a little bit, the two main advisory committees that will be rolling up and making recommendations. One thing I do want to point out to this team here, let me back up one slide again and just say these two committees have already been appointed and formed, and are currently working to approve budgets and start to recommend projects out of the Tourism Business Improvement District funding pot. As I mentioned earlier, the TBID itself is going to give us a new way of funding the organization, and we will be returning or freeing up the funds that were previously TOT funds that ran the NLTRA and returning them to workforce housing and transportation projects in Eastern Placer County through a new committee called the NLTRA TOT Committee. And I want to touch on this committee because obviously I think this will be of interest to this group. We are currently seeking members for this committee, and I'm going to put in the chat at some point here if I can figure out how to get in there while I'm doing a presentation. Maybe it might have to wait till after I'm done, but a link to apply to be on this committee because we have some experts in the field with both transportation and housing in this group right here. And probably the chances are many of you know people who are either advocates for transportation and housing or experts in the transportation and workforce housing field who we are looking for to participate on this committee. So this committee will recommend to the Placer County Board of Supervisors on final expenditure of TOT allocated funds for housing and transportation projects in Eastern Placer County. There'll be a focus on identifying affordable housing and transportation projects. The members of the committee will include representation from workforce housing and transportation organizations, as I mentioned, or experienced individuals or advocates of transportation and workforce housing. The committee size, we have kind of gotten some suggestions on and compared it to an existing committee that's similar, which is the CAP committee. So it'll be about a 13-member committee. Members will be appointed by the NLTRA Board of Directors, and there'll be up to 2 advisory members appointed by the county CEO's office. And these will be individuals with housing and transportation expertise. this committee makeup is outlined in our current five-year agreement with Placer County. I do want to just run through and give everybody a quick idea of our funding, what's available, how to work, and kind of who is ultimately giving final approval for expenditures. So our TBID Advisory Committee will oversee our entire TBID budget minus the Zone 1 budget. And that'll be about $5.2 million. The governing use of funds is our TBID Management District Plan. The TBID Advisory Committee will recommend to the NLTRA Board, and the NLTRA Board is the final approving body on expenditures for TBID funds. Roughly the same process here for the TBID Zone 1 Advisory, in that it's managed by the MDP and recommends to NLTRA Board for final approval. Now, there's one difference in the funding pots here that I do want to point out, and it's pretty obvious as we talk through this, that it's just the final approvers on the TBID assessment funds is the NLTRA Board, whereas TOT funds, transient occupancy tax funds, the final approver there is going to be the Placer County Board of Supervisors. So for our new NLTRA TOT committee, that will see about $4 million annually for transportation and housing in Eastern Placer County. We'll make recommendations to the NLTRA Board, who then in turn recommend to the County Board of Supervisors. And then we also co-convene a committee called the CAP Committee with Placer County CEO's office and Stephanie and Lindsay and their team, which also oversees about $4 million of annual expenditures. That currently the governing use of funds is the Tourism Master Plan. And they recommend to NLTRA and County CEO's office and ultimately to the Placer County Board of Supervisors. From a partner's perspective, and this is a limited list, so this is just some of the key partners that we'll be looking to work with, of course, that we already do is Placer County, Incline Village Crystal Bay Visitors Bureau, Tahoe Regional Planning Agency, Truckee North Tahoe Transportation Management Association, Sustainable Recreation and Tourism Consortium, Mountain Housing Council, Tahoe Fund, NTPUD, TCPUD, North Tahoe Fire Protection District, Visit Truckee, Town of Truckee, Truckee Airport District, and Reno Tahoe Airport Services. So again, thank you for the time here. I know that might have been a little bit longer than expected, but I just wanted to make sure this critical group understands the transformation we're in right now and what some of the opportunities are going to be coming down the road as these committees start to get formed and are able to start processing work. I'm happy to take any questions at the moment. Turn it back over to you, Tara.
Great. Thanks so much, Tony, and welcome. Welcome as the new CEO. We're happy to have you as part of our group. So yeah, any questions for Tony? And I also just want to open it up to any other partner updates before we take a 10-minute break.
Morning, this is Stephen Prescott. I just wanted to ask Tony, are there any plans around the trash generated by tourism this summer? Because every summer it seems like that's a recurrent problem and it overwhelms TTSD. Is there any subcontracting going on with other trash providers to kind of alleviate the trash situation this summer?
That's a great question. I think that's something we need to work on, Stephen. At this point, I personally have not been involved. I know there's been discussion around the stakeholders in Northlake about how we do address that. And I think that'll be a conversation going forward for sure.
Oh, yeah.
And this is Lindsay Romack. If you don't mind, I'm happy to jump in on that. And now I'm wearing my Placer County hat because I work for the county CEO's office. But Stephen, the county is again going to be working with Clean Tahoe, who we've had a contract with this past year to help do additional trash removal. So they do that in downtown Kings Beach and downtown Tahoe City. And they do check all the county dumpsters and TART stations on the weekends. To help with maybe some of the times that normal trash service isn't servicing that area. So that is one thing the county's working on, and we look forward to working with the Resort Association on additional ways to address our trash issues.
Okay.
Great. Thanks, Lindsay. All right, everyone. Well, we are going to take a 10-minute break, and we will see you back here in about 10 minutes at 9:40. Thanks so much. All right, welcome back, everyone. Hope you had a good break. We're going to go ahead and launch right into our working group and program updates. I'm going to give the floor to Steve Frisch, President of Sierra Business Council, to discuss the policy working group updates, as well as meetings we've had with partner lobbyists to discuss federal and state advocacy efforts and setting up meetings with legislators in Sacramento. Steve, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. Christina, if you can go to the first slide, please. Well, good afternoon or good morning, everybody. Our government affairs group has been busy. You see a list of the membership in the government affairs group and the policy working group, rather, listed here. And a reminder, if anyone would like to join the group, we'd be happy to have you. We meet on a monthly basis and update on essentially policy in mostly focused on Sacramento, but occasionally federal policy, but also looking at kind of government agency activities, including things like the low-income housing tax credit program and HCD planning and policy. So everyone is welcome to join. Next slide, please. So as far as legislative policy and position letters, our working group has been meeting. I know that in the agenda, Christina shared with you our legislative policy tracking worksheet, which is pretty complicated. We're tracking about 60 different pieces of legislation right now. And you can see in that policy tracking sheet what positions Mountain Housing Council's policy team is taking on some of those pieces of legislation. So we have about 18 bills that we're writing letters of support for. Many of those letters of support are going to be going, well, some of them have gone in already, but many of them will be going in next week in advance of a series of legislative meetings that we're planning on starting next week, and then we'll probably go into the next week. So much of that policy position is coordinated with the lobbying representatives that are representatives of the local jurisdictions. We're almost completely in alignment with the local jurisdictions as far as their positions on the policy. Occasionally, there might be a variance between the local jurisdictions and the Mountain Housing Policy Working Group team, but we've done a pretty good job, I think, of coordinating and making sure that we're roughly on the same page. Of course, the big thing hanging out there right now is the governor's May revised budget, which is due out the week of May 10th. There is a strong expectation that there will be significantly increased funding for housing and homelessness in that budget. As many of you know, the state is running a very large budget surplus, actually something in the range of about $45 billion, although a big chunk of that surplus is likely to be taken up by capital improvement projects in order to avoid some of the state spending limits, which is known to policy wonks as the GAN limit. And then also, there's still a lot of debate in the legislature about a gas tax rebate in California and how that could be structured or will go out. We are anticipating that there will be some kind of gas tax rebate bill, which will bite into that budget surplus, probably in the range of about $12 billion. So as we've been talking to our policy advocates in Sacramento, we're thinking that's a pretty likely scenario right now. So they're working on a deal for that. We have also might note that the State Department of Housing and Community Development released a new statewide housing action plan about 3 weeks ago. We are anticipating that the governor's May revised budget is likely to pick some of those housing action plan items and increase funding in the budget for housing based on those housing action plan items. And then the final final comment around the May revise is that we also know that there are a number of organizations that are suggesting an increased budget allocation of an additional $5 billion, a one-time budget infusion into the infill infrastructure grant program at Housing and Community Development. We're not sure if that will show up in the governor's May revised, but to the extent that that could align with the new HCD housing action plan, we think it's likely to see an increase, up to $5 billion, but probably not $5 billion in the infill infrastructure grant program. So we've continued to meet with partners of Mountain Housing Council on a regular basis, including the Rural Smart Growth Task Force, which is a group of about 15 rural affordable and achievable housing advocates, although admittedly their focus is much more on affordable housing than achievable housing. Have met recently with Housing Now, which is a statewide coalition that works on homelessness issues more than anything else. And then also have recently had meetings and I attended the conference for Housing California and meetings with the California Coalition for Rural Housing. So we've continued to have partnership meetings that have kind of expanded Mountain Housing Council's reach into some of these statewide organizations in order to try to get them to kind of understand the needs up here. I have to say, one of the challenges with that the Housing Policy Working Group runs into on a regular basis is that many of the statewide organizations are much more focused on affordable housing than achievable housing. We have a relatively unique need here, and that need is not necessarily shared across the entire state. So one of the challenges, I think, going forward is increasing pots of funding for achievable housing and different mechanisms for doing that. So that's something that our policy working group has talked about focusing on pretty strongly in the next legislative session. We've been doing outreach to individual legislators' offices. We're beginning to set meetings up. As we set meetings up, we'll be inviting members of the policy working group the broader Mountain Housing Council if they'd like to attend those meetings. And we should be getting schedules out early next week as far as legislative meetings. Most of those are going to be half-hour meetings done via Zoom. It's still been relatively difficult to schedule in-person meetings with legislative members and legislative staffers due to not just the COVID restrictions, but also the point that not everyone really has office meeting space now because the Capitol is in construction of the new legislative offices. So most of those meetings are going to be Zoom meetings and will probably be roughly a half an hour long. And we'll be distributing the materials we'll be using to those meetings to you guys next week. And then finally, we are working on setting up a meeting that we are preferring to be an in-person meeting after the May revise comes out with the California Department of Housing and Community Development, who can probably be more instrumental in what we do here than just about any other entity. So as we get that meeting set up, we'll be talking to the local jurisdictions and to others about what kind of team we might want to take down to Sacramento to meet with HCD and what the agenda for that meeting would be. Next slide, please. So our next working group meeting is May 23rd at 2 p.m. Once again, anyone who'd like to join those meetings, welcome to join. We try to schedule the meetings on the fourth Monday of the month. And then after the budget is approved on June, it might end up being every other month as needed. You know, what usually happens here is the May revise is a huge issue. The June 15th budget deadline is a huge issue. And then things slow down a little bit after the end of August when the legislature goes out of session. So between August and next December, we probably would only need to meet every other month. So those are the things that we've been working on, and happy to take questions when it's appropriate or wait until all of the updates are done. Thanks a lot, Tara.
Thanks, Steve. I think John has a question for you.
Yeah, actually, thanks, Steve. The outline provided was excellent, and I think it really did encapsulate well what we've been grappling with. The one thing that I would like to continue to plug in repeatedly is the fact that we are working with the Insurance Commissioner's Office and the pilot program, along with hopefully a more permanent program that would more adequately address the affordability and availability of fire insurance for structural protection in this region in light of the fact that we are designated a very high fire hazard severity zone, and the affordability and availability of policies are quite an impediment both to housing cost and to even securing a mortgage. Thanks.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point, John. And Tara, we have a meeting coming up with the Insurance Commissioner's Office, I believe. Can you remind us what the date and time is of that?
I believe, well, we had a speaker event last night, April 21st, where the California Insurance Commissioner's Office did a presentation on the Safer from Wildfires program. Is that the one?
Yeah.
Yes,
so that was last
it.
night. What came out of that as far as the pilot program that they've been discussing?
Yeah, so they didn't talk too much about pilot programs. My understanding is that they're reaching out to individual homeowners and communities and kind of arranging for pilot programs, kind of on a case-by-case basis, but that we could basically get in touch with them and ask if we could become a pilot program as a particular region, if we could be considered. So I've gotten in touch with them to basically ask if we could be considered as part of that program to be a part of the Safer from Wildfires pilot program at this time, just because it's a great program. But folks can watch that if they missed it last night. They can watch the entire presentation and all of the PowerPoints and all of that. Christina and I will paste a link to that in the chat box.
Yeah, they've been a little circumspect about the pilot program because they have a piece of legislation in the legislature right now that would fund those pilot projects. But based on the kind of the discussions around it, Truckee and North Lake Tahoe would seem to be kind of a natural for that program should they get funded to do community pilot projects. because we have many of the things that they've said need to be in place in order to do those pilots, which includes, an updated safety element. Everyone is in compliance with their RENA allocation requirements, and we have community wildfire protection planning in place and an independent funding mechanism in order to implement it. So if that bill passes the legislature this year, that will certainly be a top priority, John, because we recognize that's a huge issue, and we need good models from our region to demonstrate that if communities do dig in on wildfire protection, it can reduce the cost of housing. So thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, it's a really promising program. And I think folks would be surprised at how many insurance companies are actually offering discounts also for home hardening efforts. We had over 120 attendees at that speaker event last night. So a lot of folks are very interested in this idea of kind of how it's going to affect our housing stock, how it's going to affect our insurance, and how it's going to affect everything. So definitely take a look at that if you can. All right, great. Well, thank you so much, Steve. Stephen, did you have a question for Steve?
Oh, I just had a comment for the group on the fire insurance. Just want to mention USAA. If anybody or you and your family has a military affiliation, USAA is still insuring homes and condos in Lake Tahoe at very reasonable rates.
Yeah, they have a reputation for being about the most reasonable that there is out there.
Yeah.
So
I just want to mention that to the group so the group knows it.
Thanks, Stephen.
I'm actually going to paste a link to all of the insurance companies that offer discounts right now for home hardening efforts. And that's a variety of different levels of home hardening efforts and defensible space efforts if folks are interested. All right.
But Tara, you want to mute?
Oh, okay. Thanks, Christina. Great. Thank you so much again, Steve, for all of your great work.
Thanks.
As always. Next, Kathy Foley with North Tahoe Truckee Homeless Services and Jasmine Bro with Tahoe Truckee Health and Human Services are going to provide us with an update on supportive housing and homelessness working group and the point in time count. Kathy, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. Thank you very much, Tara, and everybody. Great information being shared today. I'm excited to be able to give you a bit of an update on what our group's been working on and what North Tahoe Truckee Homeless Services has moved forward with. I think there might be a couple people that at least names look new to me, so I'm just going to give you a really quick overview of what the Warming Center in North Tahoe Truckee Homeless Services does, and then I'll move into sharing some really exciting movement forward over the last 15 months. So in 2015, the Emergency Warming Center began, which was the first place for a weather-triggered warming center in our region. In 2020, when COVID hit, the needs for our unhoused neighbors, as well as our neighbors that are unhoused, living in their cars and working, increased dramatically as things began to shut down. And the Emergency Warming Center team, we rose up to fill that need for safety net services and started a day center program. As COVID continued on, we really outgrew the really small program structure and capacity that we had in place. And we were really grateful to AMI Housing, who absorbed our Emergency Warming Center program in December of 2020 and created North Tahoe Truckee Homeless Services. And this was a great match because AMI Housing had just purchased, in combination with Placer County, partnered on a home key project over in Kings Beach, which is the Seven Pines Motel, which started construction rehab this week. Very exciting. And hopefully in the next, I'm going to say by winter, but hopefully before then, we'll have 12 units of supportive housing in our region. And that'll be the first project that's been complete in this region for that specific purpose. So they absorbed our program. And because of this new partnership, we were eligible and awarded a substantial amount of emergency solution grant COVID funding from both Nevada and Placer County's Continuum of Care. And we received some generous support with private funds from a few local foundations, which has really allowed us over the last 15 months to build a strong team and temporarily stabilize the vital safety net support services that our North Tahoe Truckee region needs. This COVID funding expires in August, but as you'll see from the following slides, these safety nets really need to continue to strengthen our community for our most vulnerable neighbors that need a different form of achievable housing. We're grateful that Church of the Mountains is willing to extend our lease on their lower level of the church and the little house next door through June of 2023. So we have a location through that point. And we're currently working with the counties and Continuum of Cares, along with reaching out to other entities and foundations for partnerships to continue serving the neighbors this way. And once that funding feels like it's in place, then we'll be picking up the pace again, working on identifying a long-term location that could provide these services in our region. So any ideas on funding or locations, feel free to reach out to me. Next slide, Christina. This is our team that gets together either monthly or bi-monthly as we're discussing creating right-sized services for unhoused neighbors to be housed, but also to have the wraparound services that people need in order to stay housed. And anybody is welcome to join this meeting. We would love to have you. Next slide. So I'm going to give you a quick overview of our programs and where we stand to date. This graph shows you the 6th season and our 7th season. We just completed our 7th season of the Emergency Warming Center. Ends the end of April, open on the most severe weather nights. And although our numbers of overnight stays lowered a little bit since last year, part of that's due to people being housed, which is a wonderful thing, but still shows that there were 331 times that somebody would have slept outside or in their car and had no support had this type of service not been available to the North Tahoe Truckee region. Next slide. The Day Respite Center, which started out of the efforts of COVID, has been open 244 days since January of 2021. Currently, we're open 3 days a week on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, and we are providing guests with very basic necessities. So these are neighbors that are living outdoors, living in other places not meant for habitation, some living in their cars, and some working here in our community. Next slide. Another piece of the Emergency Day Center and Warming Center is that we've been able to implement case management. And once a guest has been with us for a couple of weeks and they are moving towards finding housing or work in this area, we connect them with one of our case managers. And the case managers are helping them to address certain issues, very basic, such as IDs and Social Security cards, and other steps needed to move forward for health and well-being and a roof over their head. And so 99 individuals have participated in that. Next slide. We've been able to supplement the street outreach program that had been going on. In 2016, Nevada and Placer County partnered through Mental Health Services Act funding to create a homeless outreach coordinator position. In November 2021, that position moved from Sierra Community House over to our program, just so that person would have the supports and we could all be working with our unhoused neighbors in the same way. They were already a lot part of our team. And then we have 2 other staffers that are able to help that person. So when people are going out to meet people where they're at and share services and encourage people to engage in services that are going on, they're doing it safely with 2 people at a time. Next slide, please. Another project that was able to be put in place through this COVID funding was an emergency room project, which allowed us to, and is allowing us to, house some of our most vulnerable, chronically homeless or newly homeless neighbors in a hotel room for an extended period of time. And this is done really for our chronically homeless to stabilize their situation, to keep them alive, wrap them with support services, and move them towards housing. And so you can see that we've had 2,717 bed nights since that began last winter, and that it's working. Many of these folks have moved into housing, and 2 more will be hopefully moving into housing the end of April. Next slide, please. So a huge celebration for our team, for this region, for Jasmine, Bro, and the counties, and mostly our neighbors that are now housed, is that we've had 39 neighbors that have been housed since January 2021. And some of this came through the funding efforts. Some of this came through Town of Truckee and the developers in Nevada and Placer County on some of the below market rate housing that was created. But we've housed 24 chronically homeless neighbors, which would be neighbors that are living literally homeless, living outside, living in cars, other places not meant for habitation. They've been in that situation for a year or longer, either in a straight shot or through different episodes, and they have a disabling condition. And then we've housed 15 that are newly homeless. And our newly homeless neighbors, this number increased since COVID. These are neighbors that are living in their cars, some of them working. They are people who lost their housing due to landlords moving in or due to houses being sold. And so we've been able to place these neighbors into positions and keep them as part of our community. And one quick story. So we have had, 3 of our neighbors that we've housed pass away this winter. And just in this last week, we had a long-term neighbor, been around, I think, 7 years or so. And although it's sad when someone we've become close to passes away, one big celebration is that this person knew that they were cared for. They'd been able to be housed through the hotel program last winter and move into housing this year. And they passed away with people around them instead of passing away alone outside in a car without a support system around them. So that's a sad note for this last week for our team, but a great thing for what we're able to support our community with. Next slide, please. And so a question I get all the time is, well, how long have these neighbors lived in our community? Are they really, tell me the story. And so I can say that, these people that we're helping house are the fabric of our community. As you can see here, that 83% of these neighbors that have been housed have lived here longer than a year. And 59% of these 41% of these neighbors have lived here 10 years or longer. And this number here includes the people I shared with in the Home Key project in the past slide. It includes the combination of the chronically homeless neighbors and our newly homeless neighbors. So our goal really is to help our neighbors get back into housing quickly when they've become homeless, and to advocate for supportive housing and other housing for adults in our community that have disabilities and need the extra support and otherwise would live outside. Next slide, please. One key to being able to house people has been financial support, as far as rapid rehousing funds and HDAP funds, which stands for Housing and Disability Advocacy Program funding, really helps us to get people into housing fairly quickly. It allows us to help support somebody with their first month's rent, sometimes a security deposit, utility deposits, and often extended subsidies for a period of months, up to even a year. And the reason that we would do this is so that we can put somebody into housing, give them that stability, and then be working with them to put in place the emergency housing voucher they might need to stay there, connect them with the services they need in order to get their Social Security income in place, their VA benefits. All of those things are impossible to do when you don't have a roof over your head, and in combination with the case management support. So at this point, of the neighbors we've housed, 31 continue to engage in case management services. And those services can range from our staff at North Tahoe Truckee Homeless Services. While they're using rapid rehousing funds, we're helping them make and take the steps forward they need in order to be able to afford the rent on their own when that subsidy is gone. And often our team is really trying to connect these neighbors with other support services around them to develop a support system and to create the wraparound services that they need. And some of the partnerships we've used this past year have been through connecting people to behavioral health and the veterans services, substance use counseling. At Coldstream Commons, there are units that were developed for adults with disability, and those have case management built in, either the help of a nurse or a social worker. Full Service Placer has helped one of our clients. We've partnered with Freed Center for Independent Living in Nevada County in order to help our clients with the HDAP funding and help them get their Social Security process and work through it. Uplift Family Services, and I'm sure my case managers could share more, but these are the typical types of support we're trying to build around people in order to keep them housed, in order to build that system for people that don't have supports from other places. And at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Jasmine, who will share about the point in time count, and then we'll open for questions if there's time. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Kathy. I always get goosebumps and like a little teary-eyed whenever I hear the housing statistics and hearing the success of the team that is working in Tahoe Truckee, because every day it seems like the team is just making miracles happen, and it's just wonderful. So point in time count, wanted to give a brief update. Many of you may have heard me talk about this before, but it's a federal requirement for each county homeless continuum of care. So it's driven by the continuum of care, and the counties play a strong collaborative partner role in this. It's established to provide a snapshot of individuals experiencing homelessness in one given night. That given night for this year was February. So it's one given night. It's not a whole complete story of the homelessness in our region, given that it happens in winter and it's only one night. So there may be people kind of entering and exiting homelessness fluidly throughout the year, but it does give us a snapshot to kind of as a baseline for what we're working towards. So our data will be finalized for Placer and Nevada County by next week and sent to HUD. It takes a little bit of back and forth for HUD to validate those data points. Once that has been validated by HUD, then the counties will do a press release, and that will be through the Housing Resource Council of the Sierras, which has partnership representation from both Placer and Nevada County, as well as community partners. So that information will be available soon, and we're all very excited to see what the numbers look like, given all of the uncertainty that we've had over the past couple of years with people entering homelessness, and then all of the success that we've had with people exiting homelessness. And then I had a few other county updates that I just wanted to provide that were kind of in line with what Kathy had been talking about earlier. Our Placer and Nevada County COCs are preparing for upcoming grants, including HAP round 2 and 3. And so that will be millions of dollars for homelessness, for prevention and assistance. And the COCs are going to be prioritizing projects that were successful with the ESG CV funding. So that is North Tahoe Truckee Homeless Services. So we're hopeful that we'll be able to continue to secure funding so that Kathy's team can continue to do this incredible work. Nevada County will also be completing a homeless strategic plan, and that's being finalized. And part of that finalization process is to get community input. So the plan will be available for review and public comment through the Housing Resource Council of the Sierras, and information will be mailed out to partners within the next couple of weeks once that becomes available. And we definitely want your review and public comment so that we can have a really comprehensive plan moving forward. And our last celebration is our No Place Like Home application that Nevada County submitted for Pacific Crest Commons. Has passed its initial threshold, and so we're going to be continue to be considered for the funding. If we get awarded for this funding, that would give us 10 more units of permanent supportive housing specific for behavioral health clients. That could be upwards of $2.6 million for the project. So that's it. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Kathy and Jasmine, for all of your incredible work. It's truly so impressive, the impact that you and your staff are making in our region. It's just, it is quite amazing. So thank you so much. All right, so at this time, I'm going to provide a quick update on what our private business employers housing network has been meeting on since our last quarterly meeting, which was in January, obviously. This group is 100% driven by what our private business employers who participate in the group want to know. So I think we get around 45 registered each time, and usually around 20 to 25 show up and express an interest in learning more about things like housing trusts, hotel purchases and conversion, density issues in the basin, purchasing property together, surplus land availability, updates on landing locals and what they offer to on employee housing, housing code issues like connection fees, parking requirements, interest in buying and rehabbing property, pairing programs, and so much more. So what we try to do is just find an expert and then bring them in to essentially meet with the group on any given interest topic and answer questions. So it is the fourth Thursday of every month at noon. Usually we try to confirm our speakers for this day and time. If we can't, we will kind of vary things up a little bit. And as I previously mentioned, our next meeting is on April 28th. That's next Thursday at noon. Shauna Purvines, Deputy Director with Placer County, is going to be speaking about the deed restricted housing and how and whether employers can get more involved in the deed restricted housing, private businesses and whatnot, which is exactly the question that Scott Zumwalt actually asked Stephanie Holloway today. Please do feel free to join us and let other employers know that they are welcome as well. It's a fantastic group. I know people have really enjoyed it and found it helpful thus far. And I think some really important partnerships and initiatives have been started kind of offline and due to the group. So that is our private business employers housing network. I'm also going to provide a quick update on some in-house business. Our speaker series, we had a fantastic one yesterday evening, which we discussed a little bit while Steve was presenting and John brought up the insurance commissioner. As we mentioned, it was on the state of California's new Safer from Wildfires program, which went over some of the insurance discounts associated with home hardening and defensible space efforts made by homeowners in the region. As I mentioned, we had more than 120 attendees. It was great. You can watch or listen to the event if you missed it by visiting our website. Our next one's going to be on May 12th at 4 p.m. And again, these are free. They're all still by Zoom. You can, just kind of play it while you're having dinner or whatever. And it'll be on the tiny home ordinances and kind of what's coming up there, how that's going to change things in our housing situations. Truckee, Placer, hopefully we'll get Nevada County as well. And that, again, is going to be May 12th at 4 p.m. So I'm really hoping this is going to be an interesting talk that might inform some of our employee housing, maybe some of our temporary community housing efforts as well. So I hope you all do join us for that. I also just wanted to put a reminder out there that our website has some really good resources to help connect renters with available housing. For those who haven't yet explored those yet, I know I put this up for our employers housing network last time, and I know a lot of folks were surprised, I think, by it. So just to kind of remind folks, you go to our website, mountainhousingcouncil.org, looking for housing, click on resources for renters. They really just have everything out there that I at least know of in terms of existing resources to connect people to rentals. And Christina's really great about keeping it updated. And then as more resources come into our grasp, like locations of deed restricted housing, perhaps, we hope to have an additional page on the website that works with our jurisdiction partners to help inform the public of kind of where those properties are located, how they work within the new programs as they come online, like the below market rate program, just any and all resources that you think would be helpful to our public in knowing more about all of the work you all are doing and how they kind of access it and use it and take advantage of it. Please just let us know, because we can get that online right away. And we love having more and more resources for renters and home buyers as well. Finally, I wanted to get back to all the hard work you all put into brainstorming over these last few years and just revisit this idea that our partners in a number of different Tiger teams and working groups are in fact working on pursuing each of these ideas in one capacity or another. One idea that I'm sure, as you all know, comes up again and again is this idea of a van life camping solutions Tiger team. This concept of establishing temporary community workforce housing on public or privately owned land in the summer or in the winter, in both campgrounds, churches, parking lots. So I just wanted to provide an update on that and let you all know that we do have a very robust group of partners that includes our supportive housing base, as well as elected officials, our jurisdiction staffers, our planners, others who regularly meet on this topic. We've studied what other communities like Telluride and Summit counties in Colorado have done, as well as other employers in our own region. Today I mentioned Palisades, Tahoe, and kind of how they did it. We've had them present to us. We've asked them questions. We've gathered their documents. We've looked at maps and parcels in our region, looking at potentially viable sites to engage the public process on. And I think the general feeling is this is something that's very much needed, very much wanted. It's something that we can do. It's something that other entities in our region have done, like Palisades, Tahoe, and kind of broken that path and kind of set the tone for all of us to do it. And if it's done through a pilot program, it's a safe way to kind of test out different types of housing projects that are desperately needed for our local workforce. So I just wanted to provide that update, that some kind of temporary community housing for local workforce is very much something that's being put through the right channels so that when it is done right. And to let you all know which parties are kind of weighing in on that. And to invite you as well, if you would like to participate in that team of dedicated individuals who are taking a close look at this and kind of vetting it. All right, so that's kind of enough talking for me, I think. More talking than I usually do. I really want to turn things back actually over to Steve Frisch with Sierra Business Council to provide us with a really exciting update on the hub, which in case you folks don't know, if anyone's new, that is from the Regional Housing Implementation Plan. That is a kind of a concept that was introduced there in order to help facilitate and streamline some of our housing needs here in the region. Before that, I just wanted to announce some exciting news that we had a very generous donation made to the Community Foundation for future housing efforts. And that is in part what's enabling us to move forward with this kind of exciting update on the hub and a potential pilot program. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Steve to provide us with an update.
Great. Thanks, Tara. So as you all know, the concept of the housing hub has kind of been something that's been on the table at the Mountain Housing Council for the last 3 years. And it was really focused around this issue that in order to really speed kind of the development of the needed niches of housing within the region, that there was a need for some kind of entity that could work directly with developers to identify and essentially market and ready sites in order to essentially speed the development of those sites. This was a critical piece of the Regional Housing Implementation Plan that we completed last year, and Sierra Business Council and the Community Foundation has continued to meet to talk about what a business model for the hub might look like. So our current plan is to move ahead with a pilot for the housing hub based on community input. Once we have a business model to share with everybody, we're looking at roughly a 2-year startup period that we think will cost roughly $500,000. And as Tara noted, TTCF has been fundraising for that effort, and we're continuing those fundraising efforts. And SBC is looking at trying to secure funding from public sources as well, like state sources, as part of some of the work that's going on around implementing the state's housing plan. So we recently met and did what's known as a business model canvas for the hub that identified who the critical partners are in order to make the hub work effectively, kind of what the unique niche of the hub would have as an organization. It's really important to us that this not be duplicative of any of the work that is currently going on by other organizations within the region. We think it's going to take kind of an ecosystem of community organizations and jurisdictional focus to address this issue. So we're really conscious of the point that we want to make sure that the work of the hub is not duplicative in any way. That business model canvas also looked at what the barriers to speeding kind of implementation of the projects identified in the RHIP would be, what the key activities of the hub would be, what level of resources and staff expertise would be necessary, how this adds to that ecosystem of social value that all of the organizations in the region are putting together, and then essentially what the key activities, including a cost structure and the revenue streams, would need to be to make the hub effective. We are planning on completing that business model canvas. Stacy is continuing on fundraising efforts, and we plan to convene a Tiger team to kind of commence going over that operating model and focusing in on determining readiness on sites that the hub could take up as a pilot project. What we would like to do is kind of focus the initial startup effort of the hub on 3 or 4 key sites in the region that meet kind of a cross section of the housing needs, and then use that startup phase to identify additional sites, as many as 7 to 10 sites that we could work with individuals, developers on advancing development on. So that's kind of where we are right now. A lot of work has gone forward. I think we're hoping that we will get to the point where we can announce the launch of the hub sometime this summer as the fundraising efforts are more successful, and we're looking forward to starting it and working with you on it. So that's all I got, Tara. You want to add anything?
That's great, Steve. I think that's great. And I did paste a little bit of info in the chat box for anybody who hadn't heard about the hub yet and just kind of wants to take a little bit of a look on it from the RHIP perspective, the Regional Housing Implementation Plan, and read a little bit more on it. But that's fantastic. Thank you so much, Steve. All right, so as we get closer to the end of our meeting, we're going to do a breakout session focusing on 2 questions. And all of you can choose which question you want to discuss and thus which breakout room you want to go into. The 2 questions are, 1, as we continue to evolve and move on to next steps in overcoming our housing challenges, what do you think our lessons learned are, those that we should bring into our next steps? Or what do you think we've been best at as a collaborative? Where have we had the most impact in terms of coming together and making a difference? So Chase and Teresa will be leading the discussions in each of the rooms, and then we'll be providing us with a summary of what was discussed when we come back. I know Christina has set up some very sophisticated anonymous Padlet situation where people can write in their comments in each of these rooms and have them be anonymous. So folks are more comfortable writing their comments rather than verbally expressing them. They can do that. And then when we come back, we'll kind of discuss all of the different feedback that we had. I'm hoping it's possible that we come back with lists of things that we did well, things we maybe should or could have done differently, and perhaps in doing so, we can identify some outstanding gaps, ideas, programs we haven't yet pursued and possibly could. So 10:26 right now, let's see. Let's give ourselves until maybe 15 minutes. Does that sound good, Christina? Maybe we'll come back just after 10:40 and report back. All right, so that's what we'll do. We'll come back. We'll give folks. Well, that might actually be a little bit too much time. Let's come back in about 10 minutes. Let's come back at 10:37. And just prepare to report back from our groups, if that sounds good to everybody. And if folks are finding that they either need more time or that they have too much time, just go ahead and send me a chat message or an email, and we can go ahead and bring you all back or provide you with more time. So, Christine, do you want to go ahead and let people go ahead and break out and choose their room?
Yeah. So you shouldn't. Sometimes you'll get a pop-up message, and if you just click that, then you're able to join the room that you want. If not, if you go to where it says more in your taskbar, click on breakout rooms, you'll see it says room 1, lessons learned, room 2, greatest strengths, and you can go ahead and just join if you just kind of hover next to it, or I can assign you to a room. And so please let me know if you need help, and I can assign you.
Great. Thanks, Christina.
And I see there's still a lot of people who haven't joined. So is it not popping up on your screen? If anyone needs help, please just let me know.
Christina, this is Steve. It's not. So
Popping up for you? Sure.
Yeah.
What room would you like to go to? Room 1 or 2?
The room 2. Oh wait, no.
Oops, sorry. I can reassign you.
Room 1.
Room 1. Okay, sure.
Sorry about that.
No, it's okay. There you go. You should be assigned now. You should see a link that says join.
Christina, it's Kathy. I'm not able to do it either. Could you help
Oh
me?
goodness, I wonder what's going on. Sure. Which
one? Room 1,
Back.
please.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Fred, can I assign you to a room?
Room 1 preferably, but I could join either one.
Sure, you got it.
This is John Hester. I'll take room 1.
Sure, you got it.
I'll take room 2.
Bill, I assigned you to room 2, so let me know. Oh, perfect.
Hi, Christina. I just messaged you. I'll go to room 1.
Room 1? Okay, sounds good.
Thank you.
Yeah. Chad, I see your message too. I'll assign you to room 1. Is there anybody else that would like help? And it's okay too if you just want to stay where you are.
All right, welcome back, everyone. As I wrote in the chat box, these links are going to stay active for a while, so you can always go in and continue to provide your feedback even after the rooms have closed. Thank you, Christina, for creating this. It's really, really cool just to see everyone's thoughts and have it all documented so that we can use it and incorporate it in terms of moving forward. I'm going to go ahead and have our room leads that we identified, Chase and Teresa, give us a quick breakdown of what was identified. Chase, do you want to go ahead and start us off?
Sure. Yeah, we had a heck of a discussion. There was so much feedback. People clearly feel strongly on both all of the amazing progress that's been made so far. But I will add that what seems to stand out to me is for every positive, there was additional feedback of something that could be done better or more or faster, right? Which I don't think is a surprise. But some of the feedback was areas that have been really done well is setting achievable housing as a key goal versus affordable. Because of the economic landscape that we're in, some of these AMI designations just don't work here. You know, the delta between the cost of housing and wages is so great that the traditional AMI focus might not be sufficient. But I think that's where things like the TRPA policy of achievable comes in and the mountain housing policy of achievable comes in. And also to help make up that delta, the concept of need exclusively local funding sources. We can't just depend on the federal or even state sources that are limited by those AMI definitions. There was this, of course, there's been incredible progress on new construction and deed restricted units. But the idea, I know that, for example, Placer County is looking at this now, reconsidering the need for an income-based deed restriction versus local worker. An example with Banff in Canada was brought up, and I'm pretty certain that the Vail and Deed program is also that way, that really you have to work locally versus tied to an income restriction. Incentives is something that's been a hot topic. I know we work on that in South Shore as well as the Mountain Housing Council does. And while they are important, we need to make sure that there is data behind it that shows that those incentives are achieving the goals that we want them to achieve. And the suggestion of a suite of incentives, a menu of them, because every development is so unique. It's really hard to say, here's one incentive and have it apply on a blanket level across developments. So perhaps a focus on a menu of a suite of various incentives, because what we want is various housing types. And those cookie cutter incentives may not be sufficient. Again, going back to what's been done really well is the government and the agency collaboration is key. Progress just simply would not happen if there wasn't a group like this pulling together all of the different agencies and partners to collaborate to make sure that we're working in the right direction. A robust, I like this quote, a robust ecosystem, but that's what we have now. But it was suggested that there could be more community engagement, and that consists of things like outreach and education. I wrote this quote down. I think I love it. To succinctly say that community engagement and education is to, quote, penetrate into the consciousness of the community. I love that. And I think that's really what it has to be, is keep that open dialogue going, right? It's not just, here's what's happening, but have it a back and forth, have the community engaged and make sure that they are saying what they think, what they see and what they need and what they feel about housing in the community. Let's see, let me go back. Oh, one person pointed out that, just how difficult this problem is, and it may take a generation or two to quote, if we're really talking about solving the housing crisis, I think so much of what we're doing are stopgaps and band-aids and short-term solutions, and those are, of course, critical. They're necessary, especially if we're talking about the homeless conversation, right? But we have to make sure that the short-term goals are not, that we don't lose vision of those sustainable long-term goals for the future, because this is a marathon, it's not a sprint. So it's going to take a long time before we quote, solve it if that's even possible. But short, medium, long-term goals are going to be critical. And I'll stop there. I hope I did my group justice. I want to give a second to see if I've missed anything or if the group would like to step in as well.
Well, thank you so much, Chase. I think it's really interesting with these comments that are gathered that, you have both the pointing out the need for leadership, but you also have pointing out the need for, no one entity or individual is going to solve this crisis. It's going to take everyone over the long term. I often feel like at Mountain Housing Council, we are relying on the same individuals over and over and over again, our kind of superstars, especially when it comes to our jurisdiction partners. It feels like we have these kind of individual superstars within them. But at the same time, we have to remain, vigilant that this is a marathon and not a sprint, and we have to be sustainable, and we can't burn people out, and just that we have to work on it as a group and a collaborative, and not just kind of rely on one individual to solve the whole problem. So really helpful feedback, really, really great comments, and we will be sharing these with the entire group so that everyone can see them as well in the follow-up to the quarterly. Teresa, do you want to go over some of the comments on what's been most impactful, our greatest strengths?
Absolutely, yeah. So the group had a lot of great conversation just about the power of collaboration, the idea generation of people from different backgrounds, the creativity, having just a central place for information that we could all go to was pretty powerful as well. There was discussion about some of the outputs of the Mountain Housing Council, like the policy papers early on, kind of held the clout of this big group that enabled individual groups to build political will within their jurisdictions or their agencies. There was encouragement of that will to change codes, to change kind of get into the weeds to make the changes that needed to happen to enable development. Again, with the power of collaboration, that it was a space that Mountain Housing Council offered, a space for informal collaboration and just strengthening the network so that you could, give one of your colleagues a call who you might not have called before to talk about a housing idea, and that those often yielded benefits as well. There was excitement about the awareness and action around supporting our unsheltered community members, that there's been so much change over the last several years and that Mountain Housing Council has been a part of that. The impact of recognition of need for housing at different income levels was discussed. And then finally, there were some concrete sort of anecdotes about employees that we know that are now housed, or community members that we know that were unsheltered and are now housed. And I think that kind of leads into just this feeling of hope was an impact that Mountain Housing Council exists, that it's a sort of demonstration, a visible demonstration that our community cares and our community is doing something. And so I think that is worth a lot as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Teresa. I think it's really, really beneficial to also point out just that rather than people and entities being kind of siloed and separated out, just have everyone kind of working together and on the same page. There's so much benefit to that, is really, really helpful, because I do think sometimes it is everyone kind of working in their own bubbles. And there is a lot of benefit to everyone kind of getting on the same page. So thank you, everyone. Again, we will keep these open. We will make them available. So thank you so much again. I'm going to go ahead and open things up to public comments for a few minutes. Christina, do you want to go ahead and post the public engagement protocol? We do this for every meeting just to make sure everyone's respectful of each other. So go ahead and open things up in case anyone hasn't shared and would like to. Not limited to partners. The entire public is welcome to. All right, I don't see any hands up.
I'll jump in. Stephen, go ahead with your comment. Oh, Stephen, you're on mute. We can't hear you.
Also make the request to the group that we meet in person on the future meeting, since federal law has changed with the latest legal ruling on COVID.
Stephen, thanks for bringing that up. Just to let folks know, each time we do kind of check with our leadership at the Community Foundation to see if they want to switch to being in person, and kind of they base it usually on the latest COVID policies and guidance from the CDC. But Definitely, if anyone has strong feelings about meeting in person versus continuing to be virtual, please just let Christina and I know, and we'll relay those to the leadership at the Community Foundation and kind of deciding on the next steps for our next quarterly. So thank you for bringing that up. So yeah, as we close, I just want to thank everyone for being here again. I know 3 hours is a long haul on a Friday morning. I also just want to remind you all that we do have an anonymous poll actually this time, kind of similar to what we did with the emergency meeting last summer and what we did with the Padlets this time. It's really helpful for us to check in on whether there's anything we're not working on that you think we should be and what capacity we should be. So please do take it. I think it's just a couple of open-ended questions where you can just vent all that you want. For us, we find them to be really, really helpful. The emergency meeting brainstorming last year gave us so much direction. So when we see the same ideas repeating, we know we need to prioritize our resources in those areas. So thank you all so much again. And I hope that you have a wonderful, wonderful weekend.
And then Tara, just really quick, John Falk had his hand up.
Oh yes, John, go ahead.
I could just also do it in the afterthought or private, but I just wanted to let the group know that while I'm fully understanding of people wanting to stop being hermits, as someone with stage 3 cancer and a blown out immune system, it needs to, people, please be sensitive to the fact that people like myself are not. I've taken all 3 injections. I've had the titer test. I have no protection against COVID, none. And so while I very much would appreciate the opportunity to meet in person, I would urge you to allow it to be hybrid if that's the case, so that people like me don't have to choose whether or not we live to attend.
Yes, and John, just to be clear, sorry I wasn't clear, it always would be hybrid. It would never just be in person, just for those exact reasons. I think probably forever. So that's just to kind of, just to be really, really clear. Thanks for bringing that up. So, all right, anything else that I missed?
I just want to say thanks to you guys, Tara and Christina, for running a great meeting.
First time without Stacy. We did our best. Thank you, Steve,
You
for
did great.
legitimacy.
Great job.
Thanks all. I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. I hope that you get through the snow and the sun comes out. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thanks, Tom. I like your picture. I hadn't noticed that before.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I couldn't get off of mute. Nice to see you. I wanted to second Steve's point and John's as well. The hybrid is a great solution.
Yeah. Great. Yeah, I imagine we'll be in virtual for a while longer before we even move to hybrid. But
well, and your backdrop is great. So you don't have that benefit in person.
Yeah, that's true. And it's very appropriate for today, right? I think that's what it looks like up there.
Yeah, indeed. All right. Well, have a great afternoon. Thank you for your time.
Take care. Bye. Rory, do you need me to stay on? To finish up your end of recording? Okay, well, if nobody needs me to stay on, I'm going to end the meeting.
I'm trying to get off. It just won't, it won't go.
Well, it's okay.
Well, all right. Take care.
You too. Okay, I'm going to end the meeting. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today. Have a good day.